2nd Pennsylvania Regiment of the Continental Line, exact as we can possibly be, recreation of the original regiment. We've been around since 1966, bringing history to life at historic sites throughout the East Coast, throughout the country. We've been to England and France as well, trying to show a true, an accurate picture of the American soldier of the War for Independence. What you see before you is not the ragged militia that started the American Revolution at Lexington and Concord, but rather essentially the professional soldiers of the Continental Army, the soldiers that were belonged to an army that was created to battle the British wherever they went, not just in a particular state as the state militias would do, but rather a professional-like army that was there to fight the British in a professional manner. It took a lot of training, it took a lot of drill, it took a lot of hardship for these men to master the skills and to live like a 18th century soldier would. But you know, they were fighting for their liberty, and that was a pretty big incentive for them. The men were led by officers such as myself. We could read, we could write. We were usually of some social position in our towns, in our communities, which is why we were given the responsibility of being a captain in charge of a company of men, or a major or a colonel in charge of a whole regiment of 10 companies. We're responsible for the behavior of our men in battlefield and in camp, and we were sort of like the PR guys for the Revolution. We had to try to tell the men why they were fighting, keep their spirits up, keep them focused on the goal, as it were, that we had. As an officer, I have uniformed myself at my own expense because I supposedly have money coming from a higher stratus of society. So I have this fancier uniform that shows my rank. I have silver lace around my buttonholes and silver trim elsewhere on my uniform, silver epaulets at my side. I have this nice hunting sword, it's called, a nice small sword, which is one of my badges of rank. And all in all, I'm just outfitted a little more genteelly than the enlisted men. But this is the backbone of any army, not the officers, but rather the foot soldiers. They marched everywhere they had to go. There were no trains and wagons to take them around. They were foot soldiers. And they marched everywhere they went. They lived off of lean rations of beef and salt pork and dried peas and whatever they could muster together by foraging off the land sometimes. The delivery of food, of rations to the men, which was usually raw, had to be cooked, was in a limited amount. So like I said, they had to be very resourceful. They are the highest paid enlisted men in the world. The Continental soldier was paid more money than any other soldier in the world, $6 2/3 a month. However, he was paid in paper money. All the other soldiers in the world are paid in gold and silver. These guys get that newfangled Continental currency, which was at best a promissory note which said, if we win the war, you can cash this in, and many of them didn't. So the currency was immediately devalued, but they are the highest paid enlisted men. They have a very rugged, a very rigorous life, and in order to conduct themselves as an 18th century soldier, they drill about 4 hours a day, 2 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, 6 days a week, sometimes 7, in the manual exercise and all the maneuvering, all the marching tactics that they must be able to perform essentially flawlessly in a battle. Let's have your head. Now each soldier is uniformed and equipped, making him a completely outfitted and supplied individual in a mass of fighting men. He's got a knapsack on his back, to waterproof it, painted to waterproof it rather, in which he carries all his personal possessions and a blanket. On his right hip, he has the very important leather cartridge box, which holds up to 30 hand-wrapped paper cartridges. If those cartridges become wet, they get torn, damaged, he's not going to be able to fire his musket, so a good stout cartridge box is very important. On his other hip, he has a linen haversack in which he carries his rations, a canteen for his water, and also the principal weapon of warfare in the 18th century in every army in the world, in fact, was used principally by every army up until about the American Civil War, when muskets became rifled and became accurate. And that is the 14-inch long steel bayonet. The soldier is drilled in this. His weapon is essentially a device that softens up the objective, and the bayonet is used to push the enemy from the field, sometimes in hand-to-hand combat. Everything that these men do when they learn is based around what the weapon can do. By the way, the men are wearing regimental coats as called for by regulations for troops from Pennsylvania, Maryland, Delaware, and Virginia, blue with red facings. If from New Jersey or New York, the trim would be buff. If from the New England states, the trim would be white. And by regulation, the trim was supposed to be blue for the southern states. Reality is the trim was almost always blue and red, or blue and white. This is an all-purpose coat, all-weather coat. It's worn summer and winter, camp and battlefield, day and night, no matter what the weather is, and the soldier gets one of them a year. So you can imagine how ragged they must look in these coats after a year of hard service. In fact, we know our original regiment went almost 18 months without the issuance of regimental coats, so those guys must have been almost threadbare by that time. On their hat, the heads, the normal 18th century military hat, the tri-corner hat with black felt. Some have them bound in white wool to prevent them from